Hi there, this is Outdoor Gear Chat. We're on up to episode 15. This is Ice Axes, take your pick. I'm joined as usual by Cathy. Hello.
Hi Wayne, how you doing? No
Mm.
winter weather this year, unfortunately, or very little winter weather for enjoying ice axes. But I did see a headline today that there's maybe something polar and huge and cold heading our way. So we live in anticipation. But I'm Cathy, the owner and co-director of the Joe Brown shops in Snowdonia and the Climbers shop in Ambleside. And I'm a winter climber, a little bit of a winter climber, and I've climbed around and about. However, we do have with us today a special guest, and that is British Mountain Guide and Director of the International School of Mountaineering, Adrian Nelhams. Hi, Aid.
Hi, Cathy. Hi, Wayne. Nice to join you today. I'm over in Canada at the moment in a small village called Canmore, which is kind of very central to a lot of the sort of winter climbing over in Canada, over in the sort of Canadian Rockies on this sort of west side. So good to join you today.
And but normally you're based in Kendal, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I've got a house in Kendal. Yeah, I've got a house in Kendal. That's my kind of hometown, if you like. And but a lot of my work is away from Kendal. I do some rock climbing, but certainly a lot of work in the winter is away in the Alps, icefall climbing, or further afield to here in Canada, and or maybe in the summer in the Alps, alpine mountaineering.
Wow, awesome! And you were just saying it's warmed up nicely in Canada just recently.
Yeah, it's been quite an interesting sort of period actually. When I arrived, it was like +5 degrees, +7 degrees, and this last week we've just been through a swing of 40-degree change of weather where we've had -34, -36, which has had a massive impact both on clothing, equipment, but also what ice is safe, what ice you can climb, and how it has actually affected the ice. Those really colder temperatures that put the ice under a lot of tension and changes the sort of character and structure of that steeper ice.
That's amazing. My jaw's dropping as you're talking about the temperatures there. I can't imagine, those cold days. That's just unbelievable, isn't it?
It's pretty brutal, actually. I mean, the ice becomes, under a lot of tension. It's really brittle. It's really hard. You've got to really sort of be choosy about where you're climbing and what you're climbing, and also with those temperatures, the seriousness of walking into these sort of more remote venues and what that means as well, looking after yourself, being sort of self-sufficient.
Yeah, and you just said just before we started recording about wind chill as well. So there's whilst the air temperature's minus 30 odd, there's a bit of wind going on that can be further reducing that as well, which.
Yeah, and that's a massive consideration with your climbing in Scotland, the Alps, or here as I am in the Rockies. It might be -10, but with a strong wind, that temperature just plummets, and that's when it makes it serious. So it might be a bluebird day, but it's that wind that has a massive impact on your clothing, your equipment, and actually your planning of the day and where you go and what you do. And I think that's important in any venue, in the winter for sure.
And that wind can have an impact on ground conditions as well, not just on you. It can be you can start off in the valley, of course, and it's lovely and warm, and the ground isn't frozen. But as you ascend higher and higher and higher, ground can change quite significantly. And ice axes are kind of been developed really to help you or reduce the chance of slips, I suppose, while crossing snow and ice, and also to arrest a fall, as well as the sort of super short techie versions that are there for helping you ascend ice falls and look uber cool.
Yeah, sure. And certainly my first, when I'm actually walking into venues, for me, it's really important, as a side of ice axes, which we're chatting about today, is I think ski poles are a really key item for people to use, because an ice axe is not a walking pole, as it were. An ice axe is there for when that ground steepens up a little bit, to give you that extra security, as you're chatting about, Cathy. But I think walking in or on sort of deep snow or hard packed snow, or even a bit of ice, having 2 ski poles to sort of manage yourself over that terrain, is really crucial to me. So I think that would be my first thought, before you then lead into, okay, the ground's steepening up a little bit. How can I now look after myself, securely? And that's when I start thinking about, okay, a walking axe, a general mountaineering axe, and then that terrain steepens up again to the more technical tools that maybe we'll come on to in a bit.
And that's important. We've mentioned that on previous podcasts about running or walking, and that having 4 legs principle almost for balance, stability, and to help you move along or to conserve a bit of energy, I guess, isn't it? But it was a question that I was going to ask actually, is about, can you use ice axes as pseudo walking poles? And I guess you've just done.
And I think that's really key, actually. It's that I think people go into the mountains in winter and think, okay, I'm going for a winter walk and I'll buy a walking axe. And actually, because a walking axe is not like 80, 90 centimeters, which is what you need to stand upright to keep your weight on your feet. You know, if you've got like a walking axe at 60 or 70, you're leaning over, you're trying to use it, you're taking your weight off your feet. And actually walking in somewhere, it's key to have the weight over your feet to walk properly. So I think 2 ski poles are pretty key, actually, is that first kind of, you know, bit of kit that you're using getting into a venue before that ground sort of steepens up a little bit.
Right, awesome. And then tell me more about walking axes then. What's that? Yeah, you sort of described the height of those, but what does that mean? What's the differentiation?
Sure. I mean, there are a variety of different heights depending on how tall you are. But I think the thing to stress about a mountaineering axe or a general mountaineering axe is for that slightly steeper terrain as the snow and the ground below you sort of steepens up. It means you can sort of, you know, plunge your shaft of that axe into that sort of deeper snow. It gives you that third leg of security as you're moving up that terrain. It's got a really nice adze that you can sort of cut steps to help movement on harder terrain, and it's also got a pick as well that again you can use to get into that slightly steeper snow or harder, firmer snow, you know, as you're moving up and that ground sort of steepens. So I think for general mountaineering, you want more of a sort of, you know, a slightly curved, longer axe with a good adze and pick, you know, just for moving around and that sort of general mountaineering and general winter walking, I guess. But it's very much for when that ground steepens rather than walking. You know, it's a mountaineering axe or a, you know, that sort of style.
What were the 2 phrases that you use? I'm guessing the ones for that. Was it an adze? Is that the more sort of
yeah, the adze is like a sort of spatula on the head of the axe. You've got the shaft, you've got the head, which is the top. One end of it is the pick, and again you can turn the axe around and sort of drive that pick into the firmer, steeper snow. Or on the back of that piece, you've got like a little shovel or spatula at the back there, and you can use that to sort of cut steps, you know, on really hard terrain, you know. But certainly, you know, they're a great tool for, you know, moving around on sort of steeper terrain.
And I guess an important one for people like me who are new to this sort of language, I guess, is if you're using an ice axe, presumably you need to be up at crampons on your feet as well. You're at that level really of being out, are you? So would that be fair to say?
Yeah, they do go hand in glove, you know, crampons, you know, give you that security you need underfoot, and then the axe as the ground steepens up for the upper body. It means you've got that third leg as you sort of drive the shaft into that sort of steeper snow, or turning the pick round to sort of drive that in. So the crampons are important, but sometimes, you know, if you're walking in with your ski poles, you then get onto some snow, you might get away with just using your mountaineering axe, just cut some steps or drive the shaft in. But I think you're right. I mean, you know, crampons and axes do go hand in glove. And I think if I feel secure and safe under my feet with my crampon pointers on flat footing, then that's a great step forward. And then I pull my mountaineering axe as the ground steepens up. You know, the ski poles then go away in my rucksack, and I kind of forget about those.
Yeah, and I guess I'm asking the question about crampons as opposed to just being in hiking boots, or you know, you're not going to go out with an ice axe and a pair of trainers on, for example.
No, exactly. I mean, you know, when you're planning and kitting up for winter, the first thing is, okay, we're talking about ski poles, but also you've got some nice firm boots that have got some sort of rigidity in the boot, so that you can kick a little bit of an edge as you're walking in, as a sort of snow firms up. You can kick the boot in, you know, they're stiff enough that you can get like a reasonable crampon onto those boots as well. And then you've got like a mountaineering axe that you can then use as a sort of terrain steepen. So they're all kind of hand in glove when you're sort of thinking about equipment for the winter and, you know, and packing for that winter mountain day.
There is one scenario where you would use an ice axe and trainers, and that's if you're winter running, which is a seriously niche sport. But there's such a vast range of ice tools available. If you come into our shops and just look at the huge range that is available, they start from a really super light, almost like a running axe, if you like. They've kind of got that name, through to a super technical water ice climbing axe, and there's a multitude of different shapes moving through all of those. So just buying an ice axe, there's a lot of questions you need to ask to make sure you get the right one for the activities that you want to do.
You're luring me into buying an ice axe now.
Yeah.
That's just
I think you're absolutely right, Cathy, because, you know, you've got your general mountaineering axe that we're talking about is great. You can create a sort of snow anchor very easily with those axes. You can cut steps with it. You can plunge the shaft into steeper snow, and you can climb sort of moderate terrain with that. But just by having an axe end that's got like a heel grip at the base of the shaft, so that when you run your hand down the shaft, it catches at the bottom of the shaft onto the heel grip. That then means that you then feel more secure to climb those little icy steps or little bulges of mixed climbing terrain, or, you know, those kind of steps, because your hand doesn't feel like it's going to slide off the end of the shaft. So again, you know, the next step on in terms of ice axe is one that's maybe got a little bit more of a curved shaft, but it's got some way that you can grab the bottom of it to stop the hand slipping off. So you can then pull over short little steps and bulges, you know, but also that heel grip can possibly slide up the shaft out the way, and you can then still plunge that ice axe into the snow to give it that third leg of support to climb that securely. So, you know, again, it's general mountaineering, but you're thinking more then about, okay, some sort of moderate climbing on some steeper bulges, and how do I purchase an axe or get an axe that can do that as well, you know?
Yeah, and there's a sort of a fundamental question about when do I need an ice axe, or do I need an ice axe? And I guess it's winter conditions on the on the fell, isn't it? On the hill is, or on the mountain is. But is there any definition of that, do you think?
Yeah, I think anywhere where you're going to come across sort of snow and ice. So summer alpine mountaineering, I mean, it's not winter time, but you've got glacial travel and you've got snow slopes to get onto sort of rocky alpine ridges. You know, in the lakes or in Scotland or in Wales, as soon as sort of snow falls, you need to equip yourself, you know, with an ice axe that, as we sort of said before, you can use as a tool to move over that sort of winter terrain. And then, you know, the next ice axe you purchase is if you want to sort of get onto slightly steeper terrain that's maybe got some sort of slightly steeper bulges that are short, and an ice axe that would also adapt to that kind of scenario, you know. So anywhere with this sort of snow and ice, you know, you need to have a tool that you can bury in the snow to create an anchor, or something to cut steps, or something to give you the security as the ground steepens up, and you put those sort of walking poles away, if you like.
We've used that term a couple of times about arrest, and that is basically when you've essentially you've fallen and you're starting to slip, and you need someone to stop you. Is that basic principle?
Yeah, I mean, they do teach a lot about sort of self-arrest and things, which is basically if you start to slip and slide on a snow slope, there's a technique called self-arrest where, you know, you can get your weight over the ice axe and bury the pick into the snow, and that will slow that slide down to a point where it will stop you. And it's a good technique to have up your sleeve. But I think taking it a step back from that, I think if you can avoid a slip in the first place, so you get those crampons on early, you cut some steps, you maybe avoid that icy section, or you've got the right ice axe for the job. So I think, you know, I'd much rather be teaching good crampon technique, flat footing, how to use front points on the crampons, and then how to use an axe, you know, in a way that's going to give me that extra security, so don't have that sort of slip. But ultimately, self-arrest is to sort of stop the slip. Yeah.
And I guess some of the terms that you're coming out with there, and that sort of training, it's always best to get a guide, if some description to show you how that's
very
done.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Very definitely.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's dead useful, because I mean, you know, there is a hazard around even practicing sort of self-arrest. You know, whether you're winter mountaineering instructor or a guide or a professional of some sort. I do think that, you know, with the right guidance, because, you know, as you're sliding down the slope, if that pick, you know, isn't in the right place and your chest is over the top of it, if it's too high near your face and grabs maybe a lump of ice or a rock underneath the snow and it pops, you know, you don't want that adze, you know, going to kick out and hit you in the face. So, you know, a relevant technique. But I do think it's worth understanding and getting some instruction on how to use crampons, flat footing, how to use your front point, and how to use your ice axe, you know, in a way that you're not going to get that slip. And, you know, that's going to be the sort of last resort, if you like.
Yeah. So Cathy's mentioned a few of the different types of ice axe there as well. Within a very, you've rattled off a few different types. So we've talked about everything from a walking axe through to, you know, a specific ice climbing axes, basically. Yeah. And so what? Yeah, is there a broad number of types? You know, is there 3 or 5 categories, if you will, that could be? I think every manufacturer will have, you know, a number of different types of ice axes in their range that cover the different styles or the terrain that you may be going on to. So you've got your very simple ice axe that's sort of slightly curved shaft, it's slightly longer. That's your general, you know, winter walking, winter mountaineering ice axe that we've been chatting about. You then, if you want to go on those icy steps or move over grade 1 terrain with a bit more security, with a slightly better hand grip with that heel spur at the bottom, you want one that is a similar sort of shape but has got like that heel spur that you can slide up out the way. Because obviously, if you can't slide the heel spur out the way, then you can't drive the shaft into the snow to give you the security you need. So you need to have it down there for the steep steps, but slide it up out the way. And then if you want to get onto sort of steeper terrain again, you need to be thinking of, you know, a nice curved shaft that's got more of a hand grip at the bottom that aids you that more security as it's steeper for longer as you're actually climbing. But there's also some brands that have that hand grip at the bottom that clips up out the way. So again, you can drive the shaft into the snow on that general, more moderate terrain, which as a climber and mountaineer, you spend so much time on. So I think it's really great not to forget that that's the terrain you spend most of the time on. How do I get the security from the axe on that terrain? But also it's really useful for the mixed climbing or ice climbing that I'm doing, you know, when I get to point B, if you like. Rather than just having a really technical tool, great for the climbing, those 2 or 3 pitches. But if you've got to spend 4 or 5 hours in the day moving around more general mountaineering terrain, where do you get that safety from? You know, because it's not from a ski pole and it might not be from the ice axe because it's too technical. So there's that ground in the middle where I'd be looking for an ice axe that I can adapt for easier ground, or an ice axe that's going to be great for me actually winter climbing, mixed climbing or ice climbing. And then to move on again, you know, if you're just really focusing on sort of steep mixed or steep ice, you've got the fully curved shaft, and you've also got a hand grip that's, you know, really accommodating for the hand. It's very tilted so that it uses lots of bicep and upper body, and it means you can climb that steeper terrain easier. But knowing that on the terrain to and from it, it's going to be not quite as good because you're really focusing on the sort of steep ground that you're going onto. So they're the sort of different categories, if you like. And it's really thinking about and planning for what terrain do you think you're going on to, and trying to plan for that. And I think the most popular ice axe, I would say, would be that middle ground where you're going up to Scotland on a winter climbing day, you're going to be climbing some pitches of mixed or some snow gullies and things like that. But also you need to move around the mountains safely to get to and from that route. And so something that's fully curved, with a good hand grip, but one also where that hand grip can be moved and actually you can still plunge the tool to get that security you need. Does that make sense? It does, yeah, perfect. And I guess coming back to what Cathy, you always say, sorry, putting words in your mouth here, is the best thing presumably to do is to come into the shop and have a discussion with the staff about what they're going to be doing, essentially.
Well, yeah, definitely, because you've got, exactly as Aid said, all of these different shapes and styles, and they've all been designed for different things. But depending on your upper body strength, so for me, I've got rubbish upper body strength. So I need to make sure that any tools that I get are okay to fit my hands with gloves, because I've got quite small hands, and how they swing. if I'm going to be swinging them, I don't do it very often, but for quite a while, then if they feel comfortable when they're swinging, then obviously that's going to make my day far more enjoyable than buying an all singing and all dancing pair of tools that I can't grip properly because they're too big for my hands, and just end up getting tired. So it's definitely worth coming in and just feeling them in your hands, trying them with your gloves. Definitely don't just try them with your hands without gloves, because you're going to be using them with gloves. And talking through, because they evolve all the time, and like Aid was saying, some of the more technical ones are modular as well. So they give you lots of options as well. So it might be that something like that is worth going for, where you can swap out different picks and different adzes, hammers, whatever is working for that particular trip that you're doing. But there's other things to take into account as well, which we can't always convey either on a website, or perhaps you won't pick up from forums, and that's the rating as well, because ice axes are rated, and an awful lot of science goes into making sure that they're rated correctly for the activities they're designed for. And in the case of modular tools, the pick may be rated differently from the shaft, just because of the type of ice that you're going climb. So it can start getting really, really complex. And we can just have that, it's much easier to have that conversation in person in like 15-20 minutes than it is spending hours and then having a great trip booked, meeting Aid in Canada and just having perfect water ice for 2 weeks, and maybe you've not perhaps picked up all the information that you could have to get you the best tools for the job. Although Aid actually is the best person to speak to.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, Cathy. I think it's some good points there. I mean, I'm over here in Canada using a very technical set of tools for, steep, pure waterfall ice, water ice. And I think you're absolutely right. I think, your gloves and holding the axe and the fit of the axe is really key. And I think gloves are really key in winter mountaineering as well. I mean, I take on any winter ice climbing day, I've got 4 sets of gloves. I've got a really thick pair in my rucksack that I use as a spare, as a really warm pair. I've got a set down my chest that are keeping warm. I'm using a technical pair. So it might be that I'll use a thinner pair for that more technical terrain, but at the belays and anchors and for abseiling and standing around belaying, I mean, I've got a thicker pair as well. And I think you don't just turn up with one set of gloves. You walk in with a pair. They're a bit damp on your hands. You put them away. You've got 2 sets for climbing. You've got a spare set. And I think, the technical tools I've got, are harder to use with really thick gloves. They take, thick gloves that are hard and take a lot of energy to move and grasp something. But also you lose the feel, when you are climbing technical terrain. So gloves are pretty key as well, in terms of what gloves work for you, on those ice axes you've got for that sort of terrain. And I think feel, dexterity and warmth, it's a difficult combination to get sometimes, because sometimes they're really warm, but they're not as dexterous. Yeah. And so you do need 2 or 3 gloves on any one day. I mean, if within the first hour they're wet, that shouldn't spoil your day, because you need to have a couple of others, up your sleeve, as it were, to
quite literally, yeah,
exactly. I mean, I keep a spare set close on my chest all the time when I'm climbing. So anytime I can get them out, they're warm, and I can put them on, and I can carry on climbing. And it's accepting that's part and parcel of, purchasing ice axes, purchasing crampons, and part of the kit you need for being out in the mountains in potentially some severe weather. I mean, the forecast is only, part of the picture you're painting in planning a day, because it might be very different when you get out there, and you've got to equip yourself for that, I think.
Yeah, or very, very different from 10 minutes to the next 10 minutes as well, as we find fairly regularly in all sorts of environments. I just want to pick on a bit of terminology. It was a question I had anyway about an axe or axes plural. So what should I be buying? 2 of the same type of axe, or a walking axe and another 2 axes when I get to do whatever I'm going to be doing? How does that work?
Sure. I mean, certainly my feeling is, I mean, we talk about walking axe or a general mountaineering axe, because we're also talking about walking poles, so it's just kind of differentiation there. But a general mountaineering axe I tend to have as a single axe. That's what I use on or very moderate terrain, keeping me safe on easier terrain. But when I'm start talking about, you know, icy steps, icy bulges, or climbing, I can get away with climbing one axe, you know, reasonably well. But 2 axes or a pair of axes do give you that extra security, ease of movement with you're climbing up, or you're down climbing. You know, people will pull me up saying, yeah, I could climb grade 3 or grade 4 with a single axe. But I think, you know, for a lot of people, you know, on, you know, grade 2, grade 3 kind of terrain, having 2 axes does feel better and does give you that bit more security. I think what we haven't talked about is that, you know, is ice axe leashes. You know, which is an interesting point as well. I mean, you know, you've got a single axe, which you use for moving around the hills. They can come with a leash or without. You can choose to have a leash or without. And then you've got your 2 axes that you use in gullies, on steeper terrain, more mixed terrain. And again, there's a way to sort of leash those to you as well. So if you drop them, you're not going to lose them. You know, or there's a leash that you can have that goes around your wrist to aid with that extra security on the ice axe. So even just choosing the right leash for you. If I backtrack a little bit to that general mountaineering ice axe, I mean, I personally don't use a leash on those because it is moderate terrain, and quite often I'm zigzagging up a snow slope, you know, as I'm moving up towards a ridge.
You move it hand to hand. Yeah.
I move it from hand to hand, and I need that ease. I don't want to keep stopping at every zig or every zag. I also know that if I drop it, it's going to take a tumble, and I just need to sort of, you know, build my experience and technique, and so I don't drop it. Some people have them on little elastic extenders as you're doing that. Again, that's maybe okay for some people. It's not something I've ever adopted. I like just a single axe and use that independently. But when it comes to 2 axes, you know, whether it be, you know, icy bulges or the next step up, the longer mixed climbing or ice routes, then I think there's sort of 2 types of leashes. There's the elastic leashes that connect to the bottom of each of those ice axes. And I think their key is a sort of minimum, so that if they're buried on the floor next to the ropes as you're belaying, if the rope lifts an ice axe out accidentally, it's not going to tumble down the crag, you know, the ice fall or the gully. As you're placing an ice screw, one isn't dropped, it doesn't fall away and ruin the day. So elastic tethers, if you like, or elastic leashes on the bottom of those ice axes clipped on, you know, are a basic minimum for safety for you, and also for others maybe coming up close to you, you know, or hindering your progress in going up and having to sort of turn around and come down.
And where are they clipped to, Aid? Just asking the daft question again. Are they clipped to your harness or your belt, or?
So that elastic leash, the sort of minimum requirement really when you're using 2 ice axes, at the bottom of the shaft of your ice axes, typically there's a clip-in point. Like there's a spike on the bottom of the shaft, typically, so you can drive the shaft simply into the ice or snow. And in that spike, there's normally a clip-in point, and those 2 points are then attached to your central loop of your harness. So like a V, if you like, from your harness out to each ice axe. You know, and it's just got small little carabiners you clip into those points. And I think for whether you're belaying or climbing, I think they're essential just to keep them with you at all times.
And then the other type then is that where you'd have them around your wrist. You know.
Yeah. So the other type that gives you more security, because obviously that type is to keep your ice axes with you at all times. You don't drop them, but you're still climbing without a wrist leash. You know, you're just holding onto those ice axes. So to give you a bit more security to hold on to the ice axe itself, you might have a leash around your wrist that's then connected to the shaft of your ice axe, so that you know, that might aid you in terms of, you know, security moving up on sort of steeper terrain. I think the general trend now is to go leashless. And what that means is that wrist leash. You're not having the wrist leash, and you're just grasping the ice axis with your hands and climbing it naturally with your hands, and having those 2 tethers from the bottoms of your shaft to your harness, so you don't drop the ice axe. But there's absolutely no problem at all with having leashes on your wrist and climbing it in that more traditional way, as I've done for many years. I mean, that was all you had, and then the drive was to become, you know, more leashless, more free. You can move the ice axes around much easier because you're not connected to them. But if you want to, you can still connect yourself with the sort of wrist leashes as well to give you that extra security if you want that, you know.
And I guess the purpose of the long leash to the harness is it's not going to drop and fall a long way down, basically, isn't it? You know, like thinking of working at heights and all the rest of it, you know, whether electricians, plumbers, whatever, they've always got stuff attached to the belts now. It's a similar principle, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly that. Because like I said, you know, you could, you know, a rope moving above you could lift an ice axe off the snow and tumble down, or you could place it in some snow. And as you're placing an ice core, trying to find a bit of gear, it pops out. It just keeps it attached to you all the time, you know, so you're not left there with one axe on steep terrain, you know, or it doesn't ruin your day, but it just keeps you connected to them. Whereas the other leash on the wrist, it's more about, you know, direct security for your hand attached to the shaft themselves, you know. And if I'm totally honest with you, I mean, I'll dip between those two systems, you know, potentially when I'm working, you know, if I need to, and it's nice that I can adapt to, you know, to either of those systems. But I think that the general trend is to become leashless. So, you know, but to become leashless, you just need to have a sort of slow, steady path of experience and training up to that point, you know, so you get there feeling secure in both footwork and getting those ice axes in as well. Because, you know, you've got to get the pick of the ice axe in, and making sure that's secure before you then move up to then place the other one. And it takes some time and judgment to understand what a good placement is on the many different types of ice and snow that we get as well. You know, people committing to, I've seen it, you know, even here in Canada, people committing to an ice axe placement. And I think, well, that could probably do with another one or two hits to make sure it's just sunk in a little bit and settled before you move up on it, because you can't afford for it to pop out. I mean, any tumble with axes in your hand and crampons in your hand, crampons in your hand, is not going to end well, you know.
There's a lot of spikes flying around there, suddenly, isn't there? Yeah. No,
that is a really key point, actually, because we've talked about axes and crampons, but the other third part of the Holy Trinity is helmet. Carrying one when you, even if you're out hill walking, there's decisions to make about when is a good time to put your helmet on, making sure your noggin is protected as well, because that's important.
I think one of the biggest hazards in the mountains today is probably people. You know, we can get the conditions and the snow and the ice, but I think people is a big hazard. I think helmets have come on so much. They're super lightweight, they're easy to carry, you hardly know you're wearing them. And I do believe that, you know, anywhere where there's steep terrain above you, you need to be wearing a helmet. You know, and I think that's an essential bit of kit. Anywhere with a steep terrain above you, there could be people around a corner you can't see. There could be some sort of loose rocks that have got kind of get knocked down or come down naturally, or bits of ice. So I think you just got to be, you know, put a helmet on anywhere where there's sort of steep ground above you, and then think about how you're going to get to that steep ground. You know, do I need a mountaineering axe? Do I need something more, you know, for steeper climbing? And what sort of crampon technique do I need to get there as well? You know, but helmets are essential,
Well, sorry, we've got 5-minute warning. I'm absolutely engrossed in this conversation. I'm finding it fascinating, brilliant, and I'm making a bunch of furious notes to email over to Cathy as well. But I guess the next point is we got another expensive piece of kit, and they've got sharp edges that are going into ice or potentially pinging off rock and so on. How do I maintain my ice axe then? What's how do I look after it?
Well, I think it's a climbing tool, and if you're whacking it on rock or frozen turf or it's in ice, you know, you need to use it as a tool to give you security. And, you know, at the end of the day, you reflect on it. Okay, does it need a brush with the file to keep it sharp? You know, do my crampon points need a brush as well, just to keep them sharp? Because obviously, the more you look after them, the easier they're going to go in, and they'll feel more secure under your feet or when you're placing your axe, you know. So you do need to take care of them, you know, and keep them sharp, and then keep those sharp points away from anything else in your rucksack when you're sort of carrying them around. And when I am carrying my kit around, you know, inside my rucksack on the top is my helmet. So as soon as I see some steep terrain, I can put my helmet on. My crampons typically sit on the outside of my rucksack, so all of a sudden, okay, I can get them out easily, as do my ice axes. So, you know, that basic kit is easy to get. It's not like, oh, my crampons at the bottom of the rucksack. We'll just
such a faff.
We'll just get away with walking over this bit, and we'll cut a couple of like small little ice steps with the ice axe, and it's not good enough, especially if there's a steep drop below you. You know, get the crampons on early, that doesn't need you to mean you've got to get your ice axe out, because it might just be sort of walking ground. I mean, some of the hardest ice in the lakes I've seen recently is on the paths, and it's like crampons and and walking poles are perfect, but when that ground steepens up, you can get your walking poles away, you get your ice axe out, and then you can kind of move more safely thereafter. But I do think people are a hazard, and that's not, I think it's great seeing people out in the mountains, but just be aware that if people are climbing above you or above you more generally, just be aware of kicking ice or kicking snow or dropping something, and maybe just staying to one side, or just being aware of what's going on above you, I think is really key. And go into any environment with more than just one plan. So if there's other people on it, okay, let's go for plan B, because that's a really nice option, and we'll have a great day anyway.
Yeah, awesome. That's really, really good advice. And for anybody who's listening who's wanting to or planning on getting out in the hills, we actually have in the shops a brilliant leaflet that Ada's put together on just sort of reflecting on what questions you want to ask yourself before heading out, so you can just enjoy your day and have a great, safe day winter climbing in the mountains. And Ada also did some brilliant videos for us that are on our Joe Brown Outdoor Academy website, where you came in during lockdown and talked through all of the ice axes on the wall and explained, or you can actually just see on camera what it means about the curved shaft and a handle at the end of the shaft. So that's a great visual too. And then, of course, with the Joe Brown Outdoor Academy webpage, you can go onto the International School of Mountaineering link and book aid. I know your company does a huge range of courses, from introduction to alpine environments and right through to climbing Virgin Peaks in Kyrgyzstan that my husband Paul joined you with in 2019. Right, had the best trip. So we know everybody's going to have a great time on an ISM trip for sure.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for that, Cathy. That's great.
And that we're just about done. That was I think episode 15, ice axes, take your pick. I'm thoroughly engrossed. I'm going to have to listen again to this, unusually, because I can't listen to myself normally. But that was fascinating, Abe. Thank you.
It's like 40 minutes. You just know we're enough. We haven't gone to crampons or terrain or anything. It's exciting. I mean, that's the great thing about climbing mountaineering, isn't it?
I know. We'll come to that. That's part of the future podcast content. I've just been noted that. Sorry. Anyway, we just got a short while left. Cathy, do you want to close it off? Or?
I can. Yeah, we have our buyer's guide available to ice axes on our online web shop on our blog at www.climbers-shop.com. And on that blog as well, you can read about the history of ice axes, where we've gathered together 10 of the best classic ice axes, and you can have a go at naming that shaft. That's it's there. You can look at the silhouettes and you can work out which ice axe matches the silhouette. So hours of fun for those winter nights where you can't get out.